About been three weeks, a little over 3 weeks since I posted my video called "Dear Vivek Ramaswamy." In the video, I addressed, him as an Indian of American figure in politics and how that kind of matriculates down to people like me, a modest person, I would say, trying to work my way up the American political ladder and just really cement my version of the American dream. Very quickly that video turned to be my most popular video. I think it has over 9,500 views. Obviously, that's not really popular in the grand scheme of things. You wouldn't consider that viral, but to me, that showed that there was a lot of substance to be had. And I looked at the comments, and there was a lot of civil debate back and forth about what my video was about and things of that nature. I want to stand here today and say I really do not regret much of what I spoke. I think the most important thing about being American is being able to civilly debate with people. If you can't do that, I really question whether or not you can proclaim your Americanness. But I think the timing is perfect, honestly, to talk about another rising Indian American figure in politics, and that is Zohran Mamdani. Yesterday, I saw the not so surprising news of Zohran Mamdani's election win, and I've been thinking a lot about what this really means and what it really means for me as someone with my own thoughts, my own ideas about what it means to be American. Now, I did make a video not too long ago called "Why Zoran Mamdani is Just the Beginning," and I was filled with a lot of people in my comments criticizing me. And although I would say a lot of the criticisms in my comments are usually pretty valid, the comments on that video were a lot more personal. They were a lot more about who I am, claiming that me as a Hindu, of course, I wouldn't support a Muslim. Of course, I'm anti-Islamic or I'm Islamophobe or whatever the case is. Maybe that might have came off to you, and I apologize for that. But I would not consider myself anti-Islamophobic. I would not consider myself, whatever. I do not have a single inkling in my bone about hatefulness towards other people. And in that video specifically, I was addressing him as a policymaker, him as a politician. Not once did I mention, his religion or his ethnicity being brought up in question. And if I did, I never said explicitly that that is a problem. But people will believe whatever they want to believe, and that's kind of the crux of my argument today. That you know, Similarly, when big events happen, let's say Donald Trump's surprising win or Zoran Mamdani's surprising win, these huge populist figures with these massive followings, it's almost like this kind of this aesthetic base that I'm clued in on this. Like I know what I'm talking about, and I'm part of this big, broader movement, and we got the secret knowledge. It's right here. I'd like to take a quote from George Carlin, the late comedian as well as political commentator or I guess just commentator in general about life, talking about politicians, whether you're left, right, center, in between, whatever the case is, these politicians are not to be idolized. They do not care about you. They do not care about you. And I see the same things transcend from Donald Trump to Zoran Mamdani. But before I talk about that, I just want to say, in terms of his policies, I am very skeptical, right? I read his platform, talk about busing, free busing, talk about rent freezes, rent controls, free health care, free this, free that. It always sounds so good, and this is nothing new. This is nothing new. But why now? Why now is this so appealing to so many people? It's because of the media, and I really think it's because of this new wave of of how we interact with one another, that we've become so polarized that social media distinctively makes us into these groups based on the things that we interact with. We watch things that we like. We, filled with the utmost hate at people we don't like. We get to repost Zoran Mamdani wins or Donald Trump wins or rest in peace Charlie Kirk or whichever, aesthetic that you want to claim. It makes you feel a part of something. In an increasing age of social media, when we're all isolated, that's what we want to feel a part of. So I really do not draw a distinction between the mindset, the process it takes to develop into this MAGA mindset as opposed to the Zoran Mamdani mindset. Yeah, Zoran Mamdani presents himself as a charismatic, smiling, well-to-do guy, but underneath all that, I really do not see any problem being fixed. Now, if you want to talk specific policy, here's where I disagree with. Okay, so his whole idea, this is peddled by Bernie Sanders, who I greatly admire Bernie Sanders, though I disagree with much, if not all, of his economic policy. This idea that healthcare is a human right. Free food, free housing must be a guarantee. And who's going to pay for this? Well, the billionaires, of course. The billionaires, they don't pay any taxes. They're doing all these things. They're corrupt. They're crooked. So there's a power imbalance here that the rich are way too rich and the poor are way too poor. And so they just need to pay their fair share. And while in principle that may sound good, we know effectively that doesn't really solve all your problems. I have here that the top 1.5% of earners in New York City, and I think New York writ large, um, contribute one third of the state budget. One third of the state budget already comes from the top 1.5%. So increasing their taxes is not going to really do much. If you take in a basic economics class, it's just diminishing marginal returns all over again, where you're not going to get the same thing just by funding billionaires or just by taxing billionaires more money. And even on top of that, billionaires historically have found workarounds, have found loopholes. I feel it's a non-problem to a non-solution. Second of all, I read an article from the Manhattan Institute, a study saying that the making your budget dependent on your top earners results in a volatility, right? Many of these billionaires are very consumed in the market. They're very hell bent on the market success. So, their incomes, their liquid cash is very volatile and very risky, depending so much on, the tax dollar from the billionaire is just so ridiculous in my opinion. Um, Another bullet point I have that New York City itself is already among the highest tax rates in America, yet little progress has ever been shown. Forbes notes that $9 billion of tax revenue hit that's what Zohran Mamdani claims, that we're going to generate over $9 billion in tax revenue. It lacks a clear methodology. There's so much volatility and so much cluelessness. And also on top of that, from a legal perspective, Zoran Mamdani is still hell bent on the state legislature writ large to pass some of these tax laws that he's calling for. And, there's been talk about the uber wealthy and the business owners leaving New York City. And while the data doesn't seem to be too strong, indications and studies have shown that even if a modest, and I mean modest, amount of the wealthy in New York City leave the city to Miami or Texas or wherever, God knows, the impact could be heavy on the average day-to-day American. So all these numbers kind of go to show who Zoran Mamdani is, in my opinion. I'm not going to attack his character. I genuinely do believe that his heart is in the right place, that he does want to do the right thing for New York City. However, I will say this: I think it is delusion. I think it's uh, you know false promises, and I think it's just you can't smile your way through a failing, perceived failing city, right? We've seen time and time again that the general idea of total factor productivity. I know I'm saying a lot of economic jargon, but land and capital and labor, these things are finite quantities. So what has resulted in our living standards rise so much? That's because of total factor productivity, because we are becoming more productive as a people and as individuals. And how do you do that? How do you increase that? It's because you increase incentives. And how do you increase incentives? Well, you need an incentive to run a business. You need an incentive to, have an idea, to take on that job, to take on this loan, to go to college or go to trade school or whatever, these types of things. And so what I see with Mamdani's platform is just simply, ridiculous. You can't really promise all these things and expect none of it to come true, or expect it all to come true. You can't. Unfortunately, if that were the case, if it were just that easy that we should just tax the billionaires more money, then I'm sure most of these cities, including my own home, big city of Chicago, would have figured that out by now. Now, this is not to say that Cuomo's platform or Curtis Sliwa's platform is any better. I'm not really concerned about talking about them. But to my next point about the populism that has risen with Zoran Mamdani, you know, in my opinion, in my most humble opinion, this is not a direct attack. This is not because he's Indian. This is not because he's from, Kenya or Uganda, or whichever country he's from, or whatever the case is. That's not my intention here. But if you go on social media and you're constantly pandering by, saying, "Oh, look at me, I'm eating my Indian food, I'm eating my burrito." Like it's very political, it's very politician. All of my only point that I'm trying to make is that it's no different than someone like a MAGA Donald Trump, where he's going to these rallies. He's, famously in Dearborn, or not Dearborn, I think the city close to Dearborn, which is the most Muslimist area in the country. He was campaigning with other Muslims. So it just presents itself as this fake, kind of tongue-in-cheek kind of campaign, which just really rubs me the wrong way. I see a lot of similarities. Am I saying that Zoran Mamdani is the socialist Trump or vice versa? No. But I'm seeing the same playbook of populism, that you have this very well-to-do, charismatic person who, presents a great smile, he's funny, he's got a lot of charisma. He's just, and anytime he walks in the room, everybody's turning their head whether they like him or not. And he's presenting this idea of just total trust. Trust in me and you will have prosperity. Trust in me. Look at all these other politicians. They failed you for so many years. What are you going to lose if you trust me? Look at me. Look how great I am. I'm fresh. I'm new. I'm an outsider. Blah blah blah. It's the same playbook. So my kind of sub conclusion for this video, and I'll talk more personally later, is that no matter what the brand of populism is, whether it's left leaning, right leaning, capitalistic, totalitarian, whatever the case is, it doesn't change from the fact that I do not support these types of politicians. I just don't. In terms of a full blanket endorsement, maybe some people came to the conclusion to say, hey, you know what, mamdani was a better option than any other person on the ballot. That's fair, and that's a fair judgment to make. But I'm just saying, me as a person, what I've learned, the things that I've learned, I've I'm uh, I've opted to tread carefully, tread lightly, to understand that, you know, as much as socialism presents itself as a viable option, it just does not work in this country. Time and time again, Republicans, Democrats, the like, oh, if only we just funded these schools more, if only we just funded the hospitals more, we need to build more hospitals, we need to build more schools, build this, build that, fund this, fund that. And, what underlies it is just a rogue bureaucracy where, money just gets printed out the wazoo, inflation continues to spike, the interest rate remains volatile, markets remain volatile, and all of these sort of things, while the people who really, benefit from this country, um, are at the helm of it. And so that kind of leads me to my final conclusion, me personally, right? I guess many people may question, where did you get this perspective from? Where is this from? Believe it or not, my parents are not very political. My parents are not lawyers or politically involved. I don't think my father or my mother has ever donated to any politician. But one thing has remained true, that this country is so powerful. This country has done so much for me and my family. I remember being in a town home, going to school with a predominantly white, affluent, kids, and I'm just looking around and I'm saying, man, this is they like I remember, for better or for worse, it was a big deal when my brother got a pair of branded shoes for the first time. And I've seen that rise. My mother tells me stories about what it was like growing up for her. She didn't know the language. She, barely had any clothes in her closet. Her diet wasn't very fruitful and all these sort of things. My father working on his legs every day. That means something to me. I really take it, to heart. And, how do you think it makes me feel when someone comes in from a very affluent background? To his credit, to their parents' credit, they struggled a lot as well, to Zoran Mamdani's parents. But you have a Columbia professor, you have a very successful in her own right director, to come to me and look down upon me as if, presenting yourself as the savior, that I'm gonna hold your hand and I'm gonna take you to the promised land, or whatever the case is. That's what it comes off to me. And it just seems so disingenuous. Maybe I'm out of my ass, maybe I'm, looking through rose tinted glasses, or whatever the case is, but that's just how I feel, right? I would consider myself very fortunate to be in this country. Not on any other country on earth would I be able to do the things that I'm doing. And I think my parents could agree with me. It's not perfect. It'll never be perfect. That's why the founding fathers say strive for a more perfect union. It's never going to be perfect, but there is virtue in that we're going to make it perfect every day. And one of those virtues is the fact that I get to sit here, say how I feel, and Zoran Mamdani gets to win an election fair and square and gets to run New York City how he sees fit, because that's the beauty of this country. But to tear it all down, to present these kinds of these diatribes and section people off to say, okay, we the wealthy, or we the disadvantaged, we the poor, we this, we that, we this color, we this ethnicity, we this religion. You're just dividing up, I feel, what is the strongest glue about why America has prospered so much. And that's this idea that we're all American. This country we owe our lives to give us these opportunities to get where we are right now. And to section off people, in my opinion, is very hateful, and it's very dangerous. Obviously, it results in a lot of political benefit. This is not exclusive to Mamdani, as I said earlier. Donald Trump has done this a lot. I've talked to people in Appalachia. I've talked to people, in the suburbs who say, Donald Trump clings to us. Donald Trump represents, you know, anti-establishment. He's gonna, drain the swamp and all these sorts of things. It's the same divisive rhetoric. Um, so at the end of the day, that's kind of how I feel. I've been going on for way too long. I anticipate a bunch of people in the comments to make accusations at me, and that's fine. You have your, I believe you have your free right to express that. But I know this video has kind of been all over the place, but that's kind of been my mindset, that politicians are not one to be idolized. Politicians are not one to be seen as these Christ-like figures. Um, but yeah, I've been going on for way too long. Maybe I'll make an update. But thank you for watching. If you like the video, like the video. If you dislike the video, then dislike it. And I am out.